What's happening, cat daddies and foxy mamas? It's the Blaxploitation fanatic back with another episode of the Blaxploitation Appreciation Podcast, where we celebrate Blaxploitation culture from music to movies to books and everything in between. So let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. And today we got one of my favorite movies, my favorite Blaxploitation movies of all time, and that is Bucktown. Now, this movie stars Blaxploitation royalty. I mean, you got the king himself of Blaxploitation, Mr. Fred Williamson, and you got the queen of Blaxploitation, Pam Grier. But before we get into that, let me tell you a little bit about it. So, Bucktown came out in 1975. It was on American International Pictures, and it was directed by Arthur Marks, who did several really cool Blaxploitation films. He directed JD's Revenge, Detroit 9000, Monkey Hustle, and Friday Foster, which also had Pam Grier in it. So dude has an extensive Blaxploitation resume. So that was cool. And what this one is really about is Fred Williamson plays a guy named Duke Johnson who comes to this country town to bury his brother. And as he does, he finds out that his brother was murdered by corrupt cops. So he goes at the cops, has a little trouble. Then he calls in his boys for help. And his boys get rid of the cops, but then they take over the town. And as a result, they become even worse than the corrupt cops were. So that's kind of like the movie in a nutshell. But like I said, Bucktown is one of my favorite Blaxploitation films. I watch it every so often. And again, who do you have in it? Like I said, Fred Williamson, the king of Blaxploitation. Now, I mentioned a few episodes why I call him the king of Blaxploitation, but in case you missed it, I know some people may say, well, he did a lot of movies, but didn't have any like really quintessential Blaxploitation characters other than Tommy Gibbs from Black Caesar and Hell Up in Harlem. True, but when you think about the movies he's done, the range, he did westerns, and then more importantly, he opened his own production company, Po' Boy Productions, and produced some Blaxploitation films himself. I would argue that Fred Williamson is like the one guy who tried to keep Blaxploitation alive all the way through the 80s, because with his Black Cobra series, he kind of followed that Blaxploitation trope. But one of the other things about it is, we often talk about how some people say Blaxploitation was a negative time and it's a negative term and things like that. But one of the things I've always heard Fred Williamson say, he stuck to it, is he was like, my checks cash, the people who worked for me, their checks cash. So who was being exploited? And I love that attitude. One other thing about Fred Williamson, I was watching an interview on another platform recently, and he said something about he had three conditions in all of his contracts. One was he always gets the girl if he wants her. One was he never loses a fight. And doggone it, for the life of me, I forget the third one, but I just thought that was hilarious that he said he always put that in his contract. So that's the king of Blaxploitation, Fred Williamson. So he plays Duke Johnson in this movie. Then we have undisputably the queen of Blaxploitation, Pam Grier, which I mean, I would hope no one will argue that there's any female more important to the genre than Pam Grier. But she plays Aretha, who is, I'm guessing she was the girlfriend of Duke's brother who passed, whose name was Ben Johnson, but then later on, she kind of takes a liking to Duke and they hook up. Who else did you have in this movie? Now, even though you had Black royalty with Fred Williamson and Pam Grier, the person who really, to me, put this movie over the top and why I love this movie so much is this guy right here, Dalmas Rasulullah, or Rasulullah, however you pronounce it. But he plays Duke Johnson's boy, Roy, who, Duke calls in for the muscle for the help. But Dalmas, man, in this movie, he has some timeless dialogue. I'm going to play a clip a little bit later. And I just love him in this movie, man. This is my dude, man. So he really, to me, took Bucktown over the top and made it one of my favorite movies. You have, as part of Roy's crew, when Roy brought his crew into town, you have Tony King, who also, and I mean, I love Tony King as an actor. And side note for him, his name is Malik Farrakhan. Now he is I don't know if he still is, but he changed his name to Malik Farrakhan. And at one point, he may still be. He was the head of security for a rap group or hip hop group, Public Enemy. Go figure. But anyway, this dude always plays like villains in movies. I won't say always, but the two movies that he really stands out to me in that he's played villains, I really hated this character. Love Tony King, but hated the character. And that is the character he plays in this movie, TJ. And then some of you all may remember him as Satin from Sparkle, the way he treated Lynette McKee as sister in Sparkle. And we'll probably hit Sparkle as one of our movies a little bit later in the future. But yeah, man. So Tony King as TJ, kind of didn't like the guy. Um, Now, those were the main four characters and top bill on the poster in and of itself. If you can see right there, Fred Williamson, Pam Grier, Damas Rasulullah, and Tony King. But who else you had in this movie was Bernie Hamilton and Tierra Turner. They played. Now, it never kind of established a relationship between the three of these. Like, so Bernie Hamilton played a dude named Harley. Tierra Turner played this little hustler named Stevie, and Pam Grier, of course, with Aretha. And they were kind of like the staples or locals of the Bucktown, friends with Duke or Ben Johnson, Duke's brother. But it never talked about the relationship between the three of these. Like, I don't know if Stevie was her brother or Harley was. I mean, they were just close friends, but never described the true relationship. But anyway, you may remember Bernie Hamilton as Captain Dobie from Starsky and Hutch back in the 70s. And then Tierra Turner, he was actually in, I think it was Friday Foster with Pam Grier as well. Friday Foster or Sheba Baby. He was in another movie with Pam Grier. So they are, play an important part. And then this guy, Apollo Creed, Carl Weathers plays one of Roy's crew named Hambo. Pretty funny. And then lastly, who we got in this movie is this guy, Art Lund. Now, he plays, what's his character's name? His character is Chief Patterson in this movie. And he's one of the cops that ultimately Duke and crew get rid of. But the interesting thing about Art Lund is he also played a nemesis or a foil to a Fred Williamson character in the aforementioned Black Caesar. He was Captain Jack McKinney, who had history with Tommy Gibbs. So interesting that he plays a villain again against Fred Williamson in Bucktown. All right. So the movie in and of itself, man, like I said, great movie. Give you a quick rundown overview. So like I said, Duke comes into town for his brother's funeral, and you kind of knew Bucktown was corrupt when Williamson comes into town or Duke Johnson comes into town on train, and the first thing he sees getting off the train is this brother getting beat up by police. So right then and there, you kind of know this is a town that, all right, it probably ain't looking too good for us. He asks a cab to take him to this club. The club's closed, so he gets to this hotel. And upon getting to the hotel, that's when he meets little Stevie. Stevie's like this little hustler, man. He's like, whatever you need, and get it for you. So Tier did a great job in that role, but it's just a little funny. So now, when he checks into the hotel, this clerk, a sister, unfortunately, calls the sheriff, so calls Art on there, and tells him that, hey, this guy just got into town, last name Johnson, Duke Johnson. So then the sheriff's on alert. Now, Fred Williamson, as Duke Johnson, goes to the funeral to pay respects to his brother. And then that's where he meets Harley and Tier, along with, not Tier, Stevie. He sees Stevie and then with Harley and Aretha. So he meets them. And, Harley and Stevie are kind of all excited to meet Duke when they find out, who he is. But Aretha's she goes off on him because I guess Ben had talked about him, but he never came into town. So she kind of goes off on him. Now, Duke's come to pay his respects. He's ready to get out of there. He wants to get Ben's stuff, like anything Ben has, and get out of there. But unfortunately, they have this condition that he has to stay around for 60 days. And so during that time, Ben owned the club. That's really why he was killed, because he didn't pay off the dirty cops. So during this time, Harley and Stevie convince Duke to reopen the club. Opens the club. Club is popping. So then the dirty cops are back at it. They try to pull the shakedown on Duke. He ain't having it. He kicks some butt. And One of the funny scenes was when they try to come shake him down. What one of the what, how one of the cops treats him. So let me show you this one real quick. It's kind of funny.
All right, fellas, get out.
You want me to tell him, Clete?
No, I'll tell him, bro. Fact is, I'm gonna tell him real friendly. I'm even gonna call him by his first name. Nigga! You wanna do business in Bucktown, you gotta pay for the privilege.
I'm gonna call him by his first name. Now, the funny thing about that scene is, I don't know if you could catch it when the cop calls him nigga. It, you could see Fred Williamson biting his lip. So I don't know if like that was written into the script or if he like thought it was funny because you could tell he was holding back the laugh, and I don't know if that was written into the script that Duke's so cool that he holds back a laugh as the cop verbally assaults him, or if Fred Williamson just thought it was funny. But I always catch that when I watch that particular one. Okay. So now these cops try to shake him down. He ain't having it. He beats the cops down. So at that point, that's when Aretha, Pam Grier, takes a liking to him. Like, okay, he about it. So now they start, kicking it, hook up. And at one point, they're at Duke's crib and the cops shoot his crib up. So they like shoot his crib up, trying to take him out and tell him, screaming at him, get out of town. So now at that point, that's when Duke calls up his man Roy and Dallas Russell out, okay, or Rasulullah. So he calls Duke and he tells Duke, bring muscle. So Duke comes in, brings his crew, and right off the bat, you could tell like his crew. It was three of them that came in. It was TJ, which was Tony King. Right off the bat, you could tell TJ ain't right. And what I mean by that is like he's like looking at Aretha kind of provocatively, like he just looks like he's scheming from the get go. And Hambone, that's who Carl Weathers played. It was a character in Duke's crew named Hambone. That was Carl Weathers, and there was another guy named Josh. I don't even remember who the actor was who played him. But once the crew comes to town, they dole out vigilante justice. They pretty much take out the cops. If they don't run them out of town, they kill several of them, run some out of town. And you would think that's it, right? Yeah, call my boys in. They handled it for me. Everything's cool. And my boys leave, or Duke's boys leave, and it's all good. But no, Roy and crew see what a good thing the dirty cops had going on, shaking people down. So they decide, hey, we gonna stay around here for a while. So they wind up becoming the police. Now, during this, while they're shaking people down, there's an incident where Harley gets drunk in the club and they beat him down. So that's kind of now they're messing with Duke's people. So that's big deal. And then TJ, like I said, he ain't right. He tries to assault Aretha. So let's take a look at that scene real quick.
First, I'm gonna break your arms. And I'm gonna break your legs. I'm gonna start on your face.
So there you have it. Duke beats TJ down. And one of the things, again, like I said, I watch Bucktown frequently, several times. But one of the things that always kind of seems out of character to me is when several episodes back when we did the Hitman episode with from the movie Hitman with Bernie Casey, and I said I wasn't used to Pam Grier being a villain. I'm also not used to Pam Grier being, kind of defenseless. Like when you see TJ trying to assault her and she's helpless, like, I'm used to Pam Grier kicking butt. So, but she had to do what she had to do for this one because Fred Williamson comes in and saves her, or Duke comes in and saves her. But, I was looking at her and I was like, Pam Grier typically would be the jumped up and waxed this fool. Nevertheless, all right. So with that, after that happens, now Duke is really mad. So him and Roy get into it like, hey, Roy, why you sending your people, your crew after my people and all this and that? So they get into it. Duke's like, Roy, you got to leave town. Roy's like, I ain't going nowhere. I got a good thing going here. So get out the way. Well, what happens is Duke doles out justice, killing off Roy's entire crew, everyone except for Roy. And basically the climax is in the final battle, Roy and Duke agree to fight it out with the loser leaving town. I'm not going to tell you what happens, but you can probably guess. All right. So that is Bucktown. And like I said, it's one of my favorite movies. So I'm going to strongly, highly encourage you to go check it out. Now, although our movie for this week isn't the Bucktown soundtrack, I just had to share, like Johnny Pate did the soundtrack and the theme song. I'm going to play a little snippet of it. Luther Rabb, who was later in the group War, sings on this. And man, this cut is so funky. So I had to share this one with you.
She's always on my mind. Things are getting better in Bucktown. I see the people laying their money down. Things are getting better in Bucktown. I think I'm gonna hang around. Things are getting better in Bucktown. I see the people laying their money down.
That is funky. All right. So now, before we shift, I wanted to show you one last thing because I remember I said Thalmus Rasulallah's Roy was the guy who really set this movie off and how he had some timeless dialogue. Here is a scene, and you may have caught, like, a couple of rappers have sampled some of this dialogue. So when you listen to it and you see it, tell me if you can think of a song that used this. So here we go.
Do you think anybody here in this town is any different? They don't give a damn who gets killed, just so long as the dice keep rolling, the hoes keep hoeing, and the money keeps flowing. It all revolves around the big G, baby, the big green. Everybody, everywhere is scratching for what they can get. I'm just scratching a little harder.
I love it, man. That is classic. Everybody's the big G. It's all about the big G, baby, the big green. But Big L, rest in peace, God bless the dead, from Harlem, back in his album, I think it was 1995, Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous. On that actual title cut, he sampled the part about all they care about is the dice keep rolling, the hoes keep hoeing, and the money keeps flowing. So, and like I said, I think some others have sampled that as well. So that's what we got this week for the movie Bucktown. Check it out. All right. So if we shift over to our book for the week, our book comes from the king of Blaxploitation. So we had the king of Blaxploitation paperbacks. Let me put it that way. So we had the king and queen of Blaxploitation movies, and now we got the king of Blaxploitation paperbacks with Donald Goines. And this one's titled White Man's Justice, Black Man's Grief. Came out in 1973. What this one is about is it's the story of a brother caught up in the correctional system, and it goes into vivid details of the injustices, the atrocities, the betrayals, and the politics that go on in jails and prisons. Now, the thing about this particular one is that although it was, although it's a work of fiction, Donald Goines is always, this is what sets him apart from all other Blaxploitation paperback writers to me is, it was fiction, but he still manages to realistically expose an unfair system that really still exists today, even 50 years after this book was written. I mean, just the preface itself, where the start of the book is titled An Angry Preference, where he shares some information. And what he says back then in 1973 is still prevalent today. I was going to read it, but when I kind of timed it out, it's just too long. You guys don't want to hear me read 2 minutes of dialogue from the book. So if you can, check out White Man's Justice, Black Man's Grief. And another thing that, really how awesome Donald Goines' writing is. Most Blaxploitation paperbacks, when I read them, a good one takes me about 2 to 3 weeks to get through. Because, I'll read some, put it down, then pick it back up. The bad ones might take me several months to get through. This book, and most of Donald Goines' books, I got through this one in like 3 days. Because it's just like, just a good read, continually drawing you in, keeping you intrigued, keeping you engaged in the book. And most of Donald Goines' books are like that. So again, that's why he is the king of Blaxploitation paperbacks. Now, the one thing I will say about this book is I personally believe that every parent should force their child to read this book in order to deter them from doing something that might ultimately land them in jail. Because when you see the conditions and how he describes this, because again, a work of fiction, but I'm pretty sure some of this is rooted in probably his own experiences, because Donald Goines spent time in jail and prison, and just you know, having a kid read this will probably dissuade them or deter them from doing dirt because they don't want to go to jail. I mean, through the mother's prayer and the grace of God, I never went to jail, but I can tell you for sure, if I had been forced to read this book when I was younger, I would have definitely made sure some of the things that I did along the way that possibly could have landed me in jail, I didn't do it all. So just a little suggestion for you parents out there. Now, a couple of other things about this particular book is the main character's name in the book is Chester Himes. And I don't know if Goines did that as an homage to, Black writer Chester Himes, if anybody knows Chester Himes from he did If He Hollers, Let Him Go. I think he did he did the book that the movie A Rage in Harlem was based off of. I don't know if that was the actual title of it. He did Run Man Run, but Chester Himes kind of wrote in the 50s and 60s. So I'm not sure if this character, Chester Himes, was just going his way of giving a shout out to Chester Himes or not. The interesting thing that I gathered from this book is, the main character spends most of the book in jail in preparation of, later finding out he's going to go to prison. But the weird thing about this, because again, I'm not well versed in the correctional system, is it actually talks about how going to prison is better than going to jail because of the conditions and all that stuff. So, I mean, to me, I never want to go to either one of them. They both suck, but it was interesting that it was like, the characters in the book was like looking forward. If they knew they weren't getting out, they were looking more forward to going to prison instead of staying in jail. And then the last thing about it is that, and this is where I think Holloway Houses did some hack stuff again, is Donald Goines wrote a 4-book series about this character named Kenyatta, who's kind of like a militant who's trying to rid the ghetto of dirty cops and drug pushers. And the back of this book, so this is the 3rd edition or third cover, 3rd edition, whatever you want to call it. But the back of the book, the blurb, the book notes, is actually talking about a Kenyatta plot. And Kenyatta's nowhere in this book at all. There's just like one point in the book where there's a character named Willie Brown, and when the police or the deputy in the jail asks him what's his name, he says, my government name is Willie Brown, but my street name is Kenyatta. So I was like, oh, is this going to be the origin story of Kenyatta from the series? And that never came into play again. I don't know how, why, or what happened, but this particular, I haven't seen what the blurb on the 1st and 2nd edition looks like, but this particular one, what they're talking about here is not what this book is actually about. Confusion. All right. So that's our book for the week. White Man's Justice, Black Man's Grief, Donald Goines. Check it out when you get a chance. And so lastly, we're going to end up with our music, and our music is from the Queen of Soul. So we had the King and Queen of Blaxploitation movies. We had the King of Blaxploitation paperbacks. Now we're ending up with the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, and the soundtrack to the movie Sparkle. Because like I said, if you remember, Tony King was in Sparkle, played Satin, and we're probably going to cover that later. But I wanted to talk about the soundtrack today because this one came out in 1976 on Atlantic Records. And all songs were sung by Aretha Franklin, but they all were written and produced by Curtis Mayfield. Even more royalty. So now the soundtrack to Sparkle isn't as funky or powerful as like the soundtrack to Shaft or the soundtrack to Superfly. It's more like smooth R&B type of deal, but has some great songs on it. You might recall Giving Him Something He Can Feel, which was later remade by In Vogue in the late 80s, early 90s, I think. And Look Into Your Heart, which was remade at some point by Whitney Houston, who starred in the 2012 version of Sparkle. But all these things tie together, which is really cool. But those were like the most famous songs from the soundtrack. But my favorite and it is funky, is a song called Junk. And unfortunately, I don't have the tracks, but definitely great soundtrack to listen to. So those are our three things that we're going to cover for this week. But before we get out of here, you all know what we've been doing. For the Blaxploitation fanatics out there like me, I talked about how if you ever wanted to be the star of your own Blaxploitation movie or book, you can go to the site blaxploitme.com and upload a headshot and create your own movie poster or book cover. And so this week's entry comes from, got a female entry this week from Bianca Jackson. That's pretty cool. And she made up a character named Zenobia Abernathy. I love it. And the movie she did is called Taking It to the Man. Gotta love that, man. Look at that. Hey, the thing I like is like you see right there, the gun between the legs. That is true Blaxploitation style. So awesome. And then I don't like on the site, if you don't have character names, you can kind of just click a button and it'll create some random character names. I think she may have came up with Caesar Jones, with Sticks Jefferson. I know it's probably a random name based on how the site is set up to generate names. And then Diamond Winston and the Amalgamations. That's a cool name of a group doing the soundtrack. So I shout out to all the Foxy Mamas and Cat Daddies that have gone to the site and doing it, because I've been seeing a lot of activity. Let's get you on here, man. So if you like your movie poster or book cover and you want to get it on the show, send it to me. Actually, I changed where you can send it to. So now you can send it to Blaxploitme at blaxploitationpaperbacks.com. And, just send it to me. And we'll get yours up on the show. Because like I said, I love it, man. I've been out there doing several movie posters and book covers, and I'm gonna put mine up here, but I don't want to be the only one. So if you got one, you want to be on the show, just send it to me. And again, go out to blaxploitme.com and do your own movie poster or book cover. All right. So we're going to get out of here. Foxy Mamas and Cat Daddies, as always, I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. I appreciate the comments, the love you send. And we're just going to keep it going. And if there's anything you want me to watch, anything you want me to read, anything you want me to listen to in the Blaxploitation genre, let me know. I'm open to it. So I got some things that I know is on my list to cover in the future. But if you got some stuff you want to talk about or you want me to talk about, send it to me. But again, wrapping this one up, what we got for this week is our movie, Bucktown, one of the best Blaxploitation movies of the genre. Check it out. We got our book, White Man's Justice, Black Man's Grief by Donald Goines. And we got our music, the Sparkle soundtrack by Aretha Franklin. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, and I will catch you all on the flip side. Peace.